Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you attending and those watching online, and apologies for the slightly late start to this committee. We were just waiting for one or two people to make it in. My name is Councillor Jane Scullion, and I'm the leader of Calderdale Council, and I will be chairing this committee. And this is my first committee, so I'd be grateful if you would all be very kind and generous. I'd be very grateful, thank you. I'm looking forward to it tremendously. Shall we press on with the agenda then, folks? Apologies for absence is the first item. And I don't know whether I read them out, Miles, or you read them out.
So apologies for Greg Dodd, Councillor Sarah Ferrably, Richard Goodfellow and Jenny Longley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see representatives of the DNOs at this meeting, actually. Excellent. Thank you. Let me move on then, if I may, to the lovely, very nicely titled item on the agenda, and I don't know if anybody else other than me has picked this up. It says Declaration of Disposable Pecuniary Interests. I don't think pecuniary interests are very easy to dispose of, and so therefore I would like any disclosable pecuniary interests to be declared. If there's any matter on the agenda in which you have a personal pecuniary interest that you think the committee should know about, then please so declare. No? Okay, thank you very much. Disposable, disclosable, if officers could note that in the future. Thank you. Item 3 then, committee. Exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and public. I'm informed by officers there are no items on this agenda that come into that category. So if we move on, we'll dispose of the business. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of March 2023. I was not myself at that meeting, of course. And so I must ask the meeting to review and agree. And I think, Gideon, you have been kind enough to do the necessary. So are members of the committee content to agree these as a correct record of the meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And before we go on to item 5, the chair's... Please.
Sorry, just one point. In terms of page 8, I think we should have EPCs, not ECPs, in just before the resolved. So it's just a typo. I don't know if you want to pick that up or not. Just sort of confuses a bit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask a question on page 5 where it says that a query was made about the initiative, and this is the solar panels initiative, and how it would impact the bus station in Wakefield and Huddersfield, and officers were going to investigate and provide feedback. I wonder if that's happened.
Liz, would you like to just quickly update us on that?
Thanks, it's a really good question. I thought the officer might have done it directly, but if they haven't, then we'll do so. Thank you for picking that up. We'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the minutes that people want to mention? I was pleased to see in the minutes that the officers were reminded about using CO2e rather than CO2, really, and to be consistent in the usage of that. And we need to keep that in mind in documents. Thank you. Before we go on to item 5, Chair's update, and I've just got a small number of things to say. I wonder if we could, I know it will take some time, but for my benefit, if we could go round the table and do some introductions. And I particularly want to welcome any new members, and I think it's just Councillor Jenny Kent. All right, so thank you. I heard from your leader that you had been appointed to this committee, so you're very welcome. Okay, shall we start on this side to go round?
Thank you. So I'm Liz Hunt, I'm the Director of Policing, Environment and Place. And I'll take this opportunity, as I usually do at the start of committees, that we use the microphone for those of you who are new, because then the camera spans to you when it's on. So please do remember to kind of use it and turn it off again. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Afternoon, Noel. Noel Collins. So I'm Policy Manager for Net Zero and Energy at the Combined Authority.
Hi everybody, I'm Katie Dye, I'm councillor from Leeds City Council.
Hello everyone, I'm Gideon Richards. I'm a private sector member with a speciality in sustainability and renewable energy.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Jenny Kent from York, Joint Exec Member for the Environment and Climate Emergency.
Good afternoon, Jim Cardwell. I work for Northern Power Grid. I'm involved in making sure we can get people connected with all their low carbon energy.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Wilkinson. I'm a flood risk management team leader from the Environment Agency.
Hi everyone, I'm Justin Wilson, Policy Manager, Environment and Infrastructure at the Combined Authority.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Michelle Hunter. I'm from the Combined Authority in Programme Development for Employment and Skills.
Hello, I'm Peter Glover, part of the research team at the Combined Authority.
Good afternoon, I'm Martin Broadest. I'm here on behalf of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which is the partnership of 14 larger social housing providers who between us provide 180,000 homes in West Yorkshire.
Good afternoon, I'm Neil Worley, Head of Environment and Sustainability, Northern Gas Networks. I'm here as an alternate for Greg Dodd today.
Hello everyone, my name's Leah Stewart. I'm a private sector representative. I'm a consulting civil engineer and transport planner, and I'm a director at Civic Engineers, who are a Leeds business.
Hello everybody, I'm John Clark. I'm also a private sector representative. I work for Cummins. I lead their engineering organisation and their business based in Huddersfield.
Hi everyone, Scott Patient. I'm Cabinet Member for Climate Action, Active Travel and Housing at Calderdale Council.
Afternoon everyone, I'm Jack Hemingway, Deputy Leader of Wakefield Council and Cabinet Member for Environment.
Thank you all. I'm surprised at how many of you I already know. I've already identified the reprobates and the hecklers and the troublemakers. I'm not just looking at Calderdale councillors either. Let me move on to just say a little bit about the Chair's brief. And I wanted, first of all, to say a little bit about progress in developing schemes that have been identified in the Climate Environment Plan. There's been allocations of funding for the Better Homes Hub, the Green Skills and Better Neighbourhoods programmes. And that's significant because I think one of the things that perhaps has been discussed in the past is the difficulty of getting a bit of both pace and scale into the work of this committee and getting that money out of the door so that it can actually begin to do things and test things and develop things and pilot things is really important for this committee. In terms of the Better Neighbourhoods, this will actually be launched to communities next week, so watch out for that. And in item 12 on this agenda, under the Climate Pledge update, there'll be some more information about some of these schemes. The second thing I wanted to say was that, and some of you on this committee may well have had similar lobbying letters, people have written to me, hearing about my new chair of this committee, basically asking for the committee to undertake some basic carbon literacy training. And at first sight, that seems a really attractive prospect. But then I look round at the illustrious people on this committee and I realise that actually there's probably an extraordinary amount of knowledge, level of knowledge already in this committee. There are probably people who could run such sessions. There are probably people who are grappling with some of the things that this committee gets involved in for the first time. So I wonder if the committee would like us to consider the best way to upskill both members of this committee and officers. And we wondered whether members might be open to completing just a short survey of you know, confidence levels or feeling you've got knowledge and experience levels in some particular areas, anonymously, of course, so that we've just got a sense of actually where are the strengths, where are the gaps that need to be filled. Because I really don't want us to waste money on basic carbon literacy training for a number of people around this room. So I just wondered what the reflections of the committee were in terms of doing a survey anonymously and just taking that and trying to design either something or a set of somethings, you know, a set of 3 things that actually would just bring up people up to a level that was perhaps the right one for this committee at this time. I'm not saying that's a one-off either, but what do people think about a survey?
I was just going to say, does it need to be anonymous? Because I think of I've sat on the school governor thing, and you do a skills audit as part of that, and I think sometimes that is quite a useful thing to understand the skills and be open about it as well.
Thoughts? Katie?
Well, that's kind of a similar point to the one I was going to make, but also, if it's anonymous, does it not make it more difficult to fill gaps?
Anybody else? The reason why myself and officers, when we discussed it, wondered if it was anonymous, because if somebody was to say, for example, I'm very hazy on different types of hydrogen, you know, sort of, is this a confession that, you know, people feel comfortable making to officers? I mean, the analysis, of course, would be the analysis of everybody in the committee, so I suppose anonymous in that sense, but I guess the officers would know where things were coming from, and people could also say, I really need an in-depth thing on hydrogen. I'm just choosing that, but people happy for the results to be anonymised and therefore advice in terms of where it might be best to pitch what we need to do as a committee. People happy with the principle, first of all, that we're going to undertake some training. Secondly, that, well, leave it to the officers to work on what the audit might be, the survey might be. And thirdly, that people are fine to obviously give their details to officers in terms of particular areas they might like to work on, or indeed can offer, and that the results will come back to this committee anonymously. Gideon.
Yeah, can I just, thinking from a private sector point of view, like I've been in the committee for about a year now, and I'm still sometimes getting my head around the financial sides of it as well. So maybe we could think about the financial streams and things like that and how they fit as well as just the technological ones. Thank you.
Can I just check my understanding on that? Do you mean the different financial streams, and that there are many that the combined authority has that we are often taking through the assurance process? Or do you mean more widely than that, streams available outside the combined authority?
I'm thinking mainly within, but if there's anything outside that has impact on what we're doing, then that would be helpful as well sometimes.
I like that very much, actually. I think the sheer, every single profession and specialism and trade has its own set of initials. And I think particularly, I'm choosing my words with care, Liz, particularly within the combined authority, there is a proliferation of initials, particularly for funding schemes. Let's take that on board and see how we might fit that in. Councillor Patient, Scott.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea. I'm guessing as well, aside from that, and anonymised results might throw up something, but I wonder, and this may or may not happen already, but for new members, and whether that's members, elected members, or other people aside, what are we doing in the way of induction? Like, are we offering here's where we are, you know, sort of quick and dirty, like 1 or 2 sheets, here's where we're up to so far, here's what we've delivered, and here are the projects in motion that we're just able to hand out to people. I think I would hope, and I've found that if I ask any questions on anything and it's not clear, Wicklow officers have been pretty good at coming back to me and sort of filling the gaps in. So just to let people be aware that that's another avenue you can perhaps fill some knowledge gaps. But just in terms of that induction stuff, what happens? Because I know we'll all be supported as elected members in our authorities by officers and stuff. But how's that happening on a sub-regional level?
Thank you. So there is an induction at a CA-wide level. So hopefully, Councillor Kent, you were invited, and there's a couple of hours with often it's our MD and our governance services colleagues who talk about the combined authority and the committees. But I think in specifically about the content of this committee, I was actually going to have a conversation with you afterwards to see what you might want. So it's not, we don't have anything off the shelf. But I recognise and have had conversations with people previously, and I think Gideon, you mentioned it, that we haven't probably in the past done as much as we can to help new members. So I'm happy to take suggestions. If it's I'm more than happy to have conversations, and we can get a group of new members together to bring them up to speed. Hopefully the pledge paper at the end of the pack actually is probably the best the best run through of where things are at. But yeah, happy to think about that, to take ideas, particularly as obviously we've got a new member today, and we'll have another new member, as you'll see when we come later on the agenda in the autumn.
Thank you, and that's a useful suggestion about item 12, because there's a bewildering list of things that have gone through. Let me just move on in terms of the Chair's report item to say thank you to the previous Chair and Deputy Chair, Councillor Tim Swift, right from the inception of this committee. Unfortunately, a period of ill health meant he couldn't attend as many as he might do. I think if we could record our thanks for his work. And Mark Roberts, who's really held the fort as deputy and is standing down, has stood down from the LEP. Really, we're very grateful for his work, and I want to record our thanks. And we've mentioned Jenny as the new representative. I also wanted to mention as a final point that the Environment Agency's representative will formally change from Jenny Longley to Jenny Cook from the October 2023 meeting. I'm afraid it can't be you, Mark, because your name's not Jenny. Clearly that's the criteria for the Environment Agency representative. And I think that's all I need to say on the agenda for the Chair's report. If I could move on then to the next item on the agenda, and that's the governance arrangements, and I think that's you, Liz.
Thank you. This is a fairly short update, and you've covered quite a lot of the membership changes already, Chair. So this is the usual paper that we bring after we've had the AGM of the Combined Authority. It confirms the committee arrangements for the coming year. I think one thing to note and to highlight from the paper is that, as you mentioned, Mark Roberts has stepped down. There is a recruit going on at the moment for further LEP board membership, and at that point we'll then be able to come back to the deputy chair for this meeting. But it's the recommendation is to note the arrangements as approved by the Combined Authority earlier this year.
Thank you. Can I just say a little bit about the deputy chair arrangements, because you would expect at the beginning of the cycle of meetings at the beginning of a municipal year you would appoint a deputy chair, and the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, the government has decided that LEPs should be wound down and that they should, not quite sure what the right wording is, folded into the combined authority structures. And also the period of a term of office of some of our LEP representatives is coming to an end, and the combined authority are in the middle of recruiting for new members. So because of all those things, it's suggested that we don't appoint a deputy chair, which you'll see from the terms of reference attached as an appendix, that we don't appoint a deputy chair. If for some reason I was not able to come to a meeting while we're in that interim period, you would have to decide between yourselves who would take the chair for the meeting. But I don't think that's too onerous a task. I think you may well be able to manage that, and I don't intend to miss any meetings. So I just wanted to point that out. So although we haven't got a deputy chair formally, nonetheless, I think we're covered. Any questions on item 6 on the governance arrangements? Jack.
Thank you, Chair. My only question really was in terms of page 17, item 4, the liaison with the other committees. I know that's something this committee has discussed before, and the strength of the arrangements there. I just wondered if officers might go into a bit more detail as to how we see that liaison working between the various committees.
Thank you. And as this will tell you, it was one of my first questions, actually, in taking up this role and in getting briefing, because I have sat on 5 of the combined authorities, other committees. And I think it's a very good question, really, in terms of both 4 and 5, and particularly the liaison with the Place Regeneration and Housing Committee. And I think it's something we as a committee, not just the officers, could certainly give some consideration to. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you. It's a really good question. So as you'll see on the agenda today, there's a good example with Michelle Hunter being here to talk about skills. That is a piece of work that the Employment and Skills Committee has led on, but we recognise the importance of this committee's input into that. So we do try across our piece to take topics which may be being led by other committees, but ensure that you have the opportunity to input. Transport is another one. We don't have transport on the agenda today, but we have in the past had specific transport papers, and again, happy to bring that forward. There was a conversation that we had just recently about the local transport plan that's in development and ensuring you have input. So that's a couple of examples where we would expect to bring things here, even if another committee might be leading on it. If you felt that there was an opportunity to do something jointly with other committees, we could do that. So we have in the past had some kind of private workshops that we've maybe had at the end of these meetings, which help with diaries. But if there was something that you felt there was a topic that it would be better to have something jointly, then we can discuss with the chair and the chair of the other committee and do something along those lines. If there were other ways that you think we could do this without trying to add lots of papers for you to read, then we are always open to suggestions, but there's a few thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you for the question, Councillor, because I think it's something that we do need to give a bit of thought to. And I have sat on the Transport Committee and the Place Regeneration Housing Committee and the Finance and Resources Committee, and I have to say that vital though the work of those committees is, actually there perhaps wasn't as much weight and heft in terms of the understanding of the important work that the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee does, and it would be nice to see some of those things interacting much more strongly. Gideon.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the question, Jack, because it's something I've mentioned before. I do a lot of international standardisation work, and we have liaisons with other committees deliberately for this reason, so it's a two-way communication. And while it might put a bit of onus on some people, and it's up to them to decide whether they can take that on or not, I think it's a really important part. We are so cross-cutting on everything that we really need to understand exactly what everyone else is doing and how they've been thinking about the issues, because otherwise we might find that we get a paper and then suddenly, well, how does that work? So I would recommend, from my experience, that if we can do it, that we have formal liaisons with every committee.
I think officers have noted that, and I think, well, that's the takeaway in terms of coming back to us and with some plans about how we might do those things. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, really endorse those points. But aside from that, just kind of wondering who might be missing from this group, and really thinking about a couple of groups who I know have put in, well, one certainly that have put in a specific request, and that's the Regional Youth Climate Assembly, who I know have successfully embedded themselves in other groups, whether it's local authorities or metro areas. Certainly in our area in Calderdale, they've been a key voice in making sure that young people's voices are represented. and also the NHS as well. I know they've got strong representation on the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission and stuff, and so how do those interactions work? Are we able to make some, that we've got a really strong, you know, Avengers team here around the table, but could it be even stronger to fight the next battle?
I'm afraid modern film references are rather lost on me, Councillor Patient. So, Andrew.
I think the other aspect is how local government as a whole liaises with national government, and we've got the local Net Zero Forum, which is about due to meet again. And I think there's some valuable input that we could provide to those sort of organisations. I mean, for instance, government has recently cut funding to local partnerships, a company that is established by the LGA and provides some benchmarking tools which we can use on a variety of emissions for different sectors that we deal with, and that's thrown a bit of a spanner in the works. So that's something that we could very well express an opinion on and feed into things like the local Net Zero Forum. I think we really ought to be keying into that.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. We've got some thoughts on possible linkages in terms of health, people engaged in this area, in terms of youth and climate change. Very pertinent point from Andrew in terms of just looking at the different levels of this discussion, and particularly both regional and national government level. I don't want to retread ground and discussion that we've had around this table before, and I want to come to the officers just for a bit of history and reflection on that.
Thank you. It's quite a pleasure. So I think there is always opportunity to invite more kind of members around the table, but ensuring that there is still a very good conversation to be had. I think, Chair, you did ask about health when we met. There is an agreement with the Integrated Care Board, with the Combined Authority, and we've appointed an internal person to help us with the wider determinants of health across our pieces of work. So there's maybe a topic to come back to in terms of this this committee. There was also an agreement between the Integrated Care Board that the chair would sit on one of the committees. At the moment, that was decided that the chair would sit on the Place Committee. They could easily have sat on probably all of our committees, given the relationship between health and transport, health and skills, health. So it was quite a difficult decision, but with possibly with the prospect then of it maybe expanding with maybe other colleagues from the ICB attending other meetings. But that was rightly or wrongly, the kind of the original decision on health. But we should certainly be playing in the wider determinants of health into the things that we are thinking about. It's a really good challenge, and I think will also help us make the case for many of the projects that we're trying to do. Young people, can we take that offline? So I think we haven't really talked before about how we want to engage with the wider group of people, and whether it's committee members or whether there's an opportunity for you as committee members to engage differently with other groups. Because I don't think, and Councillor Cooper, you correct me if I'm wrong, that we have as a committee engaged with the local Net Zero Forum formally.
I think it's only met 2 or 3 times.
So that's yeah.
It's the key body which is supposed to link.
Okay, if the committee are content, then I'm going to ask the officers to actually take that as an action and to go away and come up with some suggestions. In preparation for this committee, I did read past 2 years' minutes, and I think warning should be issued to any young person coming to this committee that there is a lot of administrative business to be got through. So you've got that then, Liz, thank you. I'm conscious, folks, that item 6 is the first substantive item on the agenda, and we spent a little time. I didn't expect it to be such an interesting debating item, and I wonder if we could perhaps note that recommendation there, to note the governance arrangements, and to move on to the next item. Thank you. The next item is monitoring indicators, and I think, Peter, you're going to take us through this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is primarily for information. The background to it is that the committee agreed at a previous meeting that we will provide an update to the committee on headline State of the Region indicators as new data becomes available, and featured within the basket of indicators are indicators relating to greenhouse gas emissions. So the latest official statistics for 2021 local emissions were published on June the 30th. So we've provided an analysis which is set out in the paper on page 21, and it's accompanied by an index on page 27. So in terms of the analysis, it's limited to headlines because information became available only immediately before the publication of the committee papers, but we thought it'd be useful for the committee to have this information in a timely fashion. So what we were able to do was to update the analysis of the emissions trend relative to the carbon emissions pathways. So that's included. In terms of the headline results, briefly to run through those, as expected, emissions increased in West Yorkshire and nationally during 2021 compared with 2020 as the economy reopened. However, those emissions remained 5% below the 2019 level in West Yorkshire. All broad sectors of the economy saw an increase in emissions, with the industry and commercial sectors making the biggest contribution to the net increase. The transport sector saw modest growth of 3% between 2020 and 2021, and it remains well below the 2019 level of emissions. It's also worth noting that provisional UK data for 2022 is available, and that shows a reduction over the 21 to 22 period, and it seems highly likely that West Yorkshire will perform similarly when we get the next set of local data when that's published next year. So on page 32 of your pack, there is a chart that plots the updated West Yorkshire emissions trend against the carbon emission pathways, and it shows that in 2020 emissions were tracking well below the various pathways due to the impact of the pandemic. Due to the subsequent increase, the data point for 2021 places emissions somewhere between the baseline and the various pathways. And as you can see from the chart, all four of these lines are still close together at this early point in the series. So the overall message is that we still face a huge challenge, obviously, in terms of emissions reduction. You may also have noted that the various pathways presented in the chart don't lead to net zero by 2038, and as mentioned in the paper, further work is underway to address this as part of a refreshment of the pathway study. So that's back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I open for further questions, can I just ask a little bit for my own clarification in terms of, there's always the problem in terms of data and in terms of data time lag, and we're looking at pre-pandemic levels, you know, where our baseline is and so on. In terms of the data that we're looking at today that's here in front of us, just understanding the actual time lag and how close we get, once we're worked through the post-pandemic period, how close we get to more pertinent, more up-to-date data, or are we doomed to basically have a 2-year lag?
I'm afraid we're doomed to a lag at the current time. So the data for 2021, obviously, that is effectively 2 years out of date compared with the period that it addresses. The UK level data is 1 year out of date, the provisional release of that data. So we do have a more up-to-date picture of the UK trends. To be honest, the West Yorkshire and UK trends sort of mirror each other quite closely, so we can use that to get a more up-to-date picture. But in terms of a definitive picture for West Yorkshire, absent doing some kind of modelling ourselves, it's, you know, under current arrangements, we're 2 years out of date, effectively.
Thank you. Anybody else comment on this update? Andrew?
just wonder with the new figures that are going to come through, I think we're probably going to see a big dip going down related to energy price rises. So I'm wondering whether we're going to be able to separate out behaviour change. My behaviour certainly changed as a result of energy price rises. I thought it was pretty good, but become a bit of a Nazi in the house with the energy use. But I'm just wondering if there's going to be a way we can actually sort of work that out in terms of what's the result of activity in terms of improving homes, generation, and what's actually down to people themselves and their usage. Actually, that should be straightforward because it's about usage, isn't it? Actually, no, it isn't straightforward.
Thank you. We're all doing those kind of calculations. Cold winter, post-pandemic, but Peter, respond to that, please.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I suspect that the people who produce the statistics may be able to factor something into that. So at the moment, for example, they do produce temperature-adjusted figures to take account of the fact that there are fluctuations in temperature, and in fact, 2022 was temperatures were quite high, so that has an impact on energy usage. So hopefully there will be the potential to sort of model in those energy price increases and the impact on behaviour. Certainly there are data available that show sort of the impact on consumer behaviour or usage of energy based on the increased prices. So I think even if the government can't do that, then I think there's potential for us to do something at local level to try and make that sort of adjustment. I think it's a question that everybody will be asking, basically.
Andrew.
I think it's important in policy terms because how much of that is due to things that we and others have done to improve homes or whatever, and how much of that down just to price pressure. I think that because we can't pat ourselves on the back for people just improving their behaviour or out of necessity reducing the energy use that they've got. So that's quite. I think it's quite important, really.
Before I bring Peter back in, I'll just take Martin, please.
Just on the sort of domestic consumption, putting the 2 points Andrew was making together about people using less because of prices, but also the impact of insulation on reducing usage. I think the reality is putting those two together, insulation will have had an impact on, for most people, on comfort levels, but it means their money goes a bit further. It doesn't actually mean they spend much less on energy because, I think most people now, to a degree, manage the amount of energy they're using in their homes to a greater or lesser extent. And certainly in the social housing sector, an awful lot of people only put the heating on when they can afford it.
Neil.
From a Northern Gas Network's point of view, we're the gas distribution network for this region. We've just run our annual calculations. Annual gas throughput through the network was down. It was 10 to 12%, which was a lot more than we were expecting. And we're still drilling down into the numbers, but we think it's consumer behaviour led.
Which is what Andrew can probably confirm, actually. But yeah, it is difficult, really, in this kind of statistical longitudinal study, and we've had to factor in. There's been no such thing as a typical year, really, and so keep saying it's early days, and I guess the pressure, the pushback to the officers who are collecting these statistics and putting them together to give us as a committee a picture is to try and factor in and weigh those different factors and to try and push back in terms of where are we making a difference. But it isn't easy. Gideon.
Yeah, thanks. We're talking about majority of this is consumer behaviour. What we really need to understand also is that commercial issues as well. Like I was talking to a business yesterday, their monthly bill for electricity had gone from 17,000 a month to 74,000 a month. We really need to understand all of the sides of this to be able to make a proper fist of it. Thank you.
17 to 74.
Yes.
Yes. Jack next, and then Jim.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, one of the areas I'd be really interested to see a sort of deeper dive study at some point is around transport emissions, because we know we have a big role to play in that as a combined authority. We can, to an extent, control some of those emissions, and it's 11% below pre-pandemic levels is what these figures are showing. I'm presuming that's going to spike back up again in the next year's data with cars back on the road, and we know patronage levels of public transport are still below where they were. Are there longer term trends there in terms of home working, or just to know if our policies around buses in particular are cutting through and making a difference where they need to? So I'd certainly welcome a more detailed focused piece of work around transport emissions if we can do that in the future.
Thank you. I'm just going to let Leah come in because she's desperate to come in before Jim speaks.
Just very quickly on that, there is data that you send around quite regularly, and car traffic hasn't gone back up, but that's the kind of thing that could feed into something more recent. So it hasn't gone back up to pre-pandemic levels in Leeds particularly, but there are, yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say that clearly there's a number of more recent data sources in industry. For example, the electricity system operator has published this week its future energy scenarios, and that has details of estimates. I was just trying to get onto it, but I can't quite find the right page. They've got an estimate of what the cost of living crisis has done for electricity use and energy use. And I was just looking at some of our data in the same way that Neil was just reporting, and certainly our year to date to the end of June in the electricity network, this is for Yorkshire and the North East, was 4% less than the previous year. So it sort of gives you an indication of that kind of, and that's across all sectors. As per Gideon's point, it's not just residential.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to just come back and summarise? I think officers have got a number of things to go away with and work on further, and particularly the point that Gideon made about old energy sources, really, all energy usage.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that input. We can certainly look at the suggestions that have been made. So in terms of looking at the commercial sector and the transport sector in more detail, obviously the transport sector is an area where we've got a wide range of information, and also the point about other sources of information, as suggested by Jim. We'd welcome any further suggestions about those sources. I guess it's quite relevant, as was suggested, to bring in sort of proxy indicators as well, like sort of travel behaviour, which we can use either as an input to modelling or just as an indicator, a broad indicator of what's happening in terms of behaviour that influences emissions.
Martin.
Yeah, I kind of don't want to miss the opportunity to make the obvious point that no matter what, the fundamentally the data shows that we're not, picking up your point you made earlier on, doing anywhere near enough, fast enough, for a big enough scale as a society. I'm not just saying the committee is, but all of us, and that's the fundamental point that I think the report's making.
Gideon.
I just wondered, we were talking about liaison earlier, is there something we could do in terms of the other committees to ask for particular KPIs to be monitored through there and fed back to us?
I'm sure there are. Liz.
Thanks. Yeah, each committee has its own set of indicators. So Peter, I wonder if there's something about drawing out some of those other committees' indicators to then put into ours where they're relevant, particularly I think on the transport side, but we might find there's a couple of others that are relevant, so we can always do that. I think Peter's nodding, which is always a good sign, so yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
I think Martin's point is a useful reminder, isn't it? And the point that Andrew and others have made about, not too much focus on the individual, or really having a lens as a committee on the different levels that we've got to grapple with in terms of individual behaviour, in terms of business, in terms of what actually we are concerned with within this particular sub-region of West Yorkshire. and what are the levers we have as a committee and as a combined authority, what precisely they're attached to. It's all very well to the levers, but what are the sources of funding and change that actually we've got some power. So I think seeing some of the key indicators from the other committees links back to our previous discussion under the terms of reference. Let's actually see what the levers are that we have as a combined authority and what data they're collecting that actually really bears down on the things that we're discussing here. Thank you. And thank you, Peter. Thank you for that. More work to do. I'm members content to note the headlines of that data report. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 8, if we may. A particular interest of mine, the local area energy plans. I was at the local government conference last week, and it was mentioned in dispatches a number of times. And I have here a slightly tatty copy of the Calderdale initial work on the local area energy plan. I think there's lots of promise there, but I will not steal Noel's thunder. I'll pass on to you, Noel, to take us through this particular item.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper, as you've seen, so I'm not going to go through all of it, is really concentrating on two very key work streams for us as a committee. The first being, as Chair has kind of mentioned, is the local area energy planning work that we're looking to kick off across West Yorkshire, riding on the coattails of Calderdale's trailblazing work in the region. But also to give you a little bit of an update, because I know the committee has asked for this previously, around what we're doing around the hydrogen piece as well. So if we start with kind of the local area energy planning piece, so hopefully you all had a chance to have a quick look at the video that was circulated yesterday, which gives a good overview of kind of the local area energy planning process. So that was from Manchester, but it's as relevant here as it is over there. So in terms of what we're doing in that space is we're currently working alongside our local authority partners to understand how we move the kind of local area energy plans forward across West Yorkshire. The plan is that we see the value as a combined authority, and hopefully local authorities also see that value in having a local area energy plan. It gives that strategic overview of what the system looks like going forward and how it should evolve to meet our 2038 target. It will also look at kind of where we would look at particular technologies and where they would be prioritised over others, and it could also lead to kind of area-based approaches to the delivery of different technologies. So we're currently in the process of working with the local authorities to work out the options for delivery of that. We have an indicative £500,000 that is being allocated to this process, and we are going through internal assurance to secure that funding. But alongside that, we are having conversations, had one just before this meeting with Jim, related to Northern Power Grid's involvement and interface with that. We also have a conversation later this week with Ofgem to understand their role in the local area energy planning side of things as well. In terms of procurement, we're looking at a number of kind of options on how we do that, whether we do that centralised as a combined authority on behalf of the 4 local authorities which currently aren't in the process of doing their local area energy plans, or we could, each individual local authority could run with that themselves. So we're currently in that process at the moment of working that out. In terms of hydrogen, so just to kind of reference, we're about to commission a piece of work which is about our hydrogen use case. So the role of this piece of work is really to understand a little bit of a gap that we have in terms of what is the use case for hydrogen within West Yorkshire. We would use this as a way of actually setting a policy position in terms of hydrogen within West Yorkshire. At the moment, we feel as though we probably aren't able to kind of steer the conversations when it comes to hydrogen in a particular direction. So this work will give us a little bit of, well, it will give us the evidence base in which we can take a policy position. In terms of the interface with the local area energy planning, that will give us the hydrogen kind of element of the local area energy plans. In terms of probably that's probably as much as I wanted to say in terms of the work on local area energy plans and the hydrogen use case. There are kind of a couple of questions that we wanted to pose to the committee in terms of how the committee would like to be involved in terms of the local area energy planning development and the hydrogen use case, both collectively and individuals. And then there's another ask of the committee to kind of give a kind of a flavour for them of what success looks like for both of those studies when we get to the end of that process. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Noel. Can I just check in terms of the hydrogen use case study, the Combined Authority are just about to choose a contractor or issue a tender. Where are they?
Sorry, Chair. Issue a tender.
Over to you, committee, in terms of those two particular work streams, particularly thoughts on whether you particularly like to be involved in the development of one or the other of them, and also to think about, it comes back to our previous discussion about performance, what does success look like really in terms of each of those pieces of work? Gideon.
Okay, thank you very much. A few things. Yes, love to be involved with looking at this. And also, I have a question about the hydrogen side of it, because depending on who you get to do this will give a very different slant to what the answer will be. And certainly, it would probably be different to my approach, depending on who you pick. So, something to think about there. We need to make sure that the private sector and the commercial are brought very heavily into this. There's a lot of big roof spaces that we can use. There's waste to energy and new technologies that are coming on rapidly as well. And my final point is that energy isn't about borders of different local authorities. It really needs to be across the whole piece because it makes sense to do that. And that's from experience of developing wind projects and PV and things like that. So I'd really sort of ask that we could try and do it as a combined authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, and Gideon's just kind of made my first point there, which is about not doing this in isolation and making sure they're tracked properly, because these arbitrary lines they've put on around our local authorities don't mean much, do they, actually, well, sometimes they do, but actually when it comes to the geography of it. The other bit, though, is about local intelligence and governance of sort of this role, and I think just really a plea that WICA should act as a bit of a conduit to make sure that members have access to the LEAP sort of group, because we know our patches, you know, and we know what may or may not be possible in certain places, and if we don't, we certainly get representations from people that feel they do, or maybe really do know those sort of areas quite well. I think what we need to do, though, is to make sure we've got appropriate governance here, and that needs to track not just here but to Yorkshire Leaders and to the Mayor's office as well. So I think it's going to be a really important piece when we do it together. Manchester have sort of done some of this work. I know Calderdale, we're starting some of that work, but it's going to be great that we're doing all these pieces of work, but to make sure that it makes sense together needs to have as many stakeholders having a piece of it in possible, and I for one would be really happy to sort of feed into some of the work.
Thank you. That's helpful. Both those contributions very helpful. I was just thinking when you said Yorkshire Leaders, I think you meant West Yorkshire Leaders. We also meet at the Yorkshire and Humberside level much less frequently, and I've been attending those meetings, and I can't remember actually anything relating to climate, energy or environment actually coming up on the agenda of those Yorkshire and Humberside level meetings, except for maybe once actually in a discussion about DRACs. But apart from that, it's not really been a substantive item on agendas, so that's a useful reminder. Thank you.
Yes, can I just offer this part of Northern Gas Networks to both the Hydrogen Initiative and the Local Area Energy Plan if you don't have it already?
Thanks, Chair. On that point, I was wondering actually if maybe Jim and Neil could say To what extent are your organisations mandated by Ofgem rules or whatever or obliged to actually get involved in and follow the outcomes of the local area energy plans?
I think there's a separate question in terms of where you're mandated and where actually it's in everybody's interest really for you to be involved and to be interested and engaged. But I'll ask.
If I can just say,
yeah.
Because I know the context of it is you have to produce 5-year plans for Ofgem, which basically direct what you're able to do. Is that right, broadly speaking? So I was just interested to know how they overlap with the LEAPs.
Okay, I'm going to take Jim first.
Yeah, let me come in. I'll answer your question, Martin. Just before I answer that specific, I'll just say, like Neil, we're very supportive of the local area energy plans. I think they do a lot of use. I think particularly from our perspective, where we've been engaged with them, with others, and as we are doing with Calderdale and increasingly with the combined authority, we see the benefit they have in converting ambition and appetite for decarbonisation into the nuts and bolts of exactly what you've got to do, particularly when it's such a challenging thing that society is seeking to do here. And I think by getting, I guess your point, Scott, about getting people around the table and getting people on the same page, that's really important. And then I think where it comes back to, and I'll start coming back, Martin, to your question here. I mean, from a network provider's point of view, I think there's certainly an expectation from our regulator that we get engaged with these local area energy plans. We don't need a lot of pulling to the table, if you like. We're leaning in anyway. But we have a lot of it is about us sharing data. So I guess we're both supporting and contributing to them, and also we do see ourselves as a customer of the output as well, if you know what I mean. So there's input and then output as a network owner and operator and investor in the region, because what we see as the real value in them is that they are feeding into our forecasting and our investment planning for the future. We can see where the investment's going to be needed, and the regulatory cycles we go through and the investment planning and the approval of expenditure that we have gives us kind of an envelope, if you like, but then it's really down to then we're then assessed by the energy regulator that we spend efficiently and we spend where it's needed, and local area energy plans are part of the evidence to demonstrate that that is indeed the case. It's not the only part of it, you'll understand, but it's one part of it. And finally, sorry, a bit of a long download, but the other thing I just to suggest is, as well as the Manchester example, we've got the North Yorkshire example, which is more local. And back to your point about being involved in Yorkshire and Humber, I think there's absolutely a need to learn from the engagement we've done there. I'd say that's definitely a bit of good practice that the folks have done there in planning a vast swathe from Skipton right across the east coast. So it's a big old area, and they've done some really interesting work there. And I think we could learn a lot from that and collaborate in the same way in whatever we do in West Yorkshire as well.
I'm just going to ask Neil, do you want to add anything to that?
No, we're the same regulatory regime as Northern Power Grid operating. I think there's an expectation we'll get involved proactively with the local area energy plans, and that's certainly the ethos we follow.
Thank you. Andrew?
On the hydrogen stuff, I know there's some work going on at the University of Sheffield at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre that they've got there, and you think, well, actually, if we're going to do some cross-boundary work, why don't we work with South Yorkshire and share costs, share learnings, all those sort of things. So, yeah, very much in favour of cross-boundary working. Why not sort of go and have a chat with them and see what we can do there, get more for our money, and probably maybe get a better outcome. Who knows?
No? Would you like to come back on some of these points?
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. There's quite a few to go at there, really. So start from the top in terms of what Gideon's point. So different slant on hydrogen depending on who you get. So we are absolutely aware of that and to the issue there, and have actually working it into the tender document to demonstrate that impartiality in terms of whoever comes through on that one side of things. So we're trying to make sure that we try and get a little bit of that in there. we absolutely reflect that we do need to not do this in the bubble in terms of the local area energy planning. So we are absolutely going to be undertaking some quite extensive kind of stakeholder engagement with this and input. It's a useless document if we don't do that. In terms of kind of the hydrogen use case, I should have really said that it's part of a wider piece of work that is funded by the North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub, where a hydrogen study is going to be done for the entirety of the geography, which is slap bang, does include South Yorkshire as well into that. And our part of that is a bit more of a deep dive study, which could act as a blueprint for how other areas really do the deep dive into how it feeds into local area energy planning. So going down to that much more micro scale rather than the kind of higher level use case kind of things. And we'll absolutely have those conversations with North Yorkshire around how we interface with their work, but also we can absolutely have the opportunity to just put something into the tender document that requires that kind of look across to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Noel. You did actually ask us also to consider the question of what does success look like, and some of the discussion we've had, I think, gives you some indication. One of it's about geographical integration, business, etc., DNOs, etc., understanding and knowledge. Can you also, as an officer, say what you think successful outcomes might be?
Put me on the spot, Chair. I suppose from my point of view, I very much see this that the local area energy plan is a bit of a spatial plan for energy across West Yorkshire. So this gives us the opportunity to be in a position where we are able to know where different areas are particularly appropriate for technologies. It helps with pipeline development. It helps us to overcome potential connection problems that we might have. It helps with those conversations, interactions with the various different DNOs. So for me, it's having a really strategic document that gives a bit more of a longer term blueprint for how the energy system develops within West Yorkshire and how we can all kind of be part of that and have a little bit more certainty about how things develop. I know we can't give complete certainty on that.
Thank you, that's good. Andrew?
So given the spatial element of it, I just wonder whether there's a real big case for us to make the links with local plans and say there should be a specific linkage with local plans with these, and how we would go about that. What should we do to make sure that these plans that local plans take account of this plan?
That's an interesting one, and I think probably needs further pondering by officers within the different bits of the public sector. Thank you. Gideon, and then I'm going to pull this item to a close.
Thank you. Two things. One, I was looking at the Manchester, the link that we were given. It makes me question who's it for. I ran a microgeneration certification scheme for 10 years between government and industry. It really jumps out that it doesn't feel like it's for the consumer. It feels very much like it's for the traders. And I wonder how that will sit with the overall constituents. If a lot of money goes into that and it doesn't actually deliver for them. The other part of this, I think, is also that we need to think about all aspects of energy. Back in 2007, we wrote a report for the Yorkshire and Humber Assembly, as was going to be, about energy and what we should do in terms of renewable energy and becoming a centre of excellence across the piece. But there's, skills requirements, there's, what we're actually going to use it for. There's a whole raft of things that we need to put into this if we're going to make it a meaningful document. Thank you.
Scott?
Yeah, thank you. And just very briefly, it's always worth pulling this back to the human element, isn't it, and making sure what the end of this looks like for the user. And so I think we need to make sure right from the beginning that we're using framing in terms of what this means about social benefits in action. This comes back to Andrew talking about, I know you're not in isolation, changing habits about how you've used heating and stuff in your home, because actually the reason we want to do this is to move away from being beholden to fossil fuels and have more renewables in all of our communities and stuff, and having that security in place.
I think there's a general point about translation, really, and communication. Jenny.
Just to second what Scott said, so York produced a draft local area energy plan at the beginning of this year, and there are two things. One, as you alluded to, it doesn't match up with the local plan, so we're already in problems. So areas have been identified as suitable of wind, which are excluded from our local plan. So, they should have combined forces. But two, it took no notice of modal shift at all. So, and we've come up with some really eye-watering figures about how many thousand heat pumps we've got to install each year. But not taking any account of the fact that we need to reduce emissions through transport and modal shift in other ways. And it's a really incomplete piece, even though it took a long time and a lot of money.
But what you're describing, Jenny, and others in the committee, is the messiness of policy conflict, really, and time lag and levels, national and regional and individual levels, right? And that's what we grapple with, and that's what I think in some ways we're trying to do. The combined authorities take some of these things and try and make them make sense on the ground. If it was easy, we wouldn't be here, would we? Thank you. I'm going to ask Noel if there's anything he wants to say in conclusion, or whether you've got enough there to go at. I can also congratulate Noel on being the first to engage in extreme flattery of the chair in his introduction. Always successful in the public sector, I think.
Thank you, Chair. No, just to kind of welcome the comments that everybody's kind of made, and just to thank you in advance for kind of any input, support, provision that you do for this process, because it won't be just about us working in isolation to do this. It will be a success if we involve everyone around this table and others from across West Yorkshire. So thank you, Chair.
I think actually the committee are looking forward to both these pieces of work actually, and to trying to make sense of things. If we could move on then, folks, to item 9, project approvals. And I have to say that if I was to do a mastermind, this would be my special subject. So I'm not going to say anything further on the area of flooding, and I'll leave it to Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll give you a walkthrough of the first item on this report, and that's the Capital Flood Risk Management Infrastructure Programme. I think in terms of context, just to set the scene, across West Yorkshire we've got just under 40,000 residential properties and around 13,000 commercial properties that are within a flood zone, and obviously that's, as a result of climate change, that's going to get, flooding is going to become more frequent and potentially more severe as well. In terms of the programme that's seeking approval, from a strategic alignment perspective, it contributes to the West Yorkshire investment strategy in terms of investment priority 3, which is delivering great places and accelerated infrastructure, and also priority 4, which relates to the climate emergency, and is also strong alignment with the Mayor's pledges. And also it should be recognised that the flood mitigation was part of the climate and environment plan, and members did prioritise that as one of the Wave 1 proposals as well, so it's something we want to see action on in the short term. I think in terms of the programme itself, I think it's emphasised that it has been developed in partnership with the EA and our partner authorities and some of our delivery partners as well, and colleagues from the EA are here today and they'll add some words in a second. In terms of the overall programme itself, it's 23 schemes across 3 phases, and they've been phased broadly based on the scale of actual development, in terms of how developed they are, and also their deliverability, and we'll touch on that in a second. I think in terms of the overall level of outputs from the programme across the whole 23 schemes, we're looking at improving flood protection to over 2,500 homes and just over 2,200 businesses as well, so it's got quite a significant impact overall. In terms of the papers, I think paragraph 4.10 does outline a full list of the 23 schemes and the proposed phasing. And there is just a small correction to make for the phase 3 schemes. So just to note that it should list the Keighley and Stockbridge flood alleviation scheme in Bradford, providing enhanced protection to 460 homes and 290 businesses, and as a separate scheme, the Batley Beck scheme in Kirklees, and that delivers protection to 21 homes and 63 businesses. So the text is slightly muddled there, but just to clarify that point. And also in the agenda part, there is a plan at page 69 that just illustrates that across the whole programme, 23 schemes across 3 phases, there is a spread of schemes across the region. And I think the plan itself shows in red the actual benefit areas, so it shows a lot of the communities that would receive enhanced flood protection through delivery of this programme. And before I go on to any more detail on the costs, I'll just pass over to Mark Wilkinson from the EA, who's just going to give us a few words about the process we went through in collaboration.
Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I must admit my heart skipped a beat when I noticed Keighley was missing from the paper, so thank you for clarifying that, it's much appreciated. So I'm Mark Wilkinson, I'm a flood risk management team leader from the Environment Agency. Just going to give a very brief background to the wider capital programme to give this some context. I know some members here will be more than aware of that, but I think it's useful to give that background and just talk a little bit about the partnership working as well. So there is a wider flood risk management capital programme for West Yorkshire. There's around 130 projects within that programme that align with the timescales that Justin sort of provided an overview in the paper. Those projects are, I think, all in West Yorkshire delivered by either the Environment Agency or a local authority. And the oversight of that programme is by the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, the RFCC, which is chaired by Colin Mellors. The programme itself follows a partnership funding policy. So essentially, projects in that programme will have some eligible funding from government called Flood Defence Grant and Aid, and that is based on the benefits that scheme provides. I think it's a fair statement to make that the majority, if not all, of the projects in that programme require further funding. So the eligible funding from government for flood risk management, flood defence grant and aid will partly meet the cost for those schemes, but you must seek contributions from the public or private sector to meet the full cost of those schemes. The paper, if you notice in 3.11, talks about we have worked with the Combined Authority in the past and received £20 million for our previous programme. I think it's fair to say that contribution from the Combined Authority was essentially the final piece of the jigsaw to deliver those projects, and those projects within that previous programme have all been delivered. As Justin mentioned, this has been developed in close collaboration, so we've built from that relationship around that £20 million, and we've now worked really closely with the Combined Authority, and this programme has been developed with the Environment Agency, Combined Authority and the local authorities, and that's really important to stress. That relationship continues. It's a very good relationship now with the Combined Authority, and they now sit on one of the RFCC sub-regional partnerships, the West Yorkshire Flood Risk Partnership. We continue to build that relationship, and really pleased with the programme that we've developed that Justin's outlined. Justin?
Thank you, Mark. So just going on to the costs now, finally. So the total scheme cost is 168 million. That's for the full programme. And as I mentioned earlier, that we have split it into phases. So phases 1 and 2A have a cost of just over 50 million to deliver. And the proposal is that we contribute up to 10 million from the Combined Authority to basically unlock some of the partnership funding that Mark just mentioned, to enable delivery of an initial package of 8 schemes. And they're the phase 1 and 2A schemes that are listed in the report for clarity. And I won't go through all the recommendations in total, but just to mention that there are listed at paragraph 435 of the report, the 5 recommendations. So I'll take those as read rather than reading through them today, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. And my comment earlier about flooding is, of course, one of the phrases we use in Calderdale is that climate change is very real in Calderdale, because flooding is really not good for the climate. I checked the papers to see whether I had to declare a parcel interest, and because 2 of the flood schemes are affect my own home, but none of those are in today's paper. I did check. I think the job of the committee in this case, in terms of these partnership schemes and the unlocking of funding, is to basically go through the combined authorities quality assurance and approvals process and send them through to the next stage. Justin's nodding. And there are 5 recommendations in the papers in front of you. Does MD particularly want to pick up any particular issue or scheme? Gideon?
Yeah, not particular schemes. I've got 3 questions though, or 2 questions and an observation. And I'll start with the observation. It was in the news earlier today that there's going to be an additional 11 million properties in flood zones. So, you know, I don't know how many of those are going to be in our own area, but it's something to consider. Given that the way the flood zones are actually allocated at the moment in the 1 to 100 years, 1 to 50 years and things like that, I was just wondering if you could maybe comment on, given that we're getting more frequent downpours, how that actually is affected. And then the final question is, given that we're talking about reducing carbon load through energy, do any of these consider renewable energy in terms of hydro schemes as part and parcel of this work that's going to be developed? Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Gideon. Yes, I'll pick up all 3 points. So the first point around additional 11 million properties in flood zones in the news today. Yeah, I think that's the very tangible and real threat that climate change brings. And I think it's worth noting it's not just the extent of flooding, but the frequency and the depths as well. That's something that we're obviously very mindful and clear of around our flood risk capital programme and the schemes that we deliver. The challenge for us is making projects which have a lengthy duration of benefits because of climate change. So that can mean that the assets we build need to be bigger. But also we're very mindful of carbon, and can we deliver projects which have less emissions, so less reliance on pumping, for example. And also developing projects which look towards nature-based solutions as well. I think the Leeds flood alleviation scheme is a really good example of that, where part and parcel of that project, so it's a civil engineering project, building walls through Leeds, but hand in hand is to make that project climate resilient and to maintain that standard protection for a longer duration. Nature-based solutions, NFM is key to that. And that's, as we all know, tree planting, soil land management, aerating the soil, more hedgerows. So that's very much part and parcel of our thinking. But I think I agree, it's an ongoing challenge that climate change is bringing is the extent, so more properties are affected, but the depths and the frequencies as well. And as we've seen over the past few weeks with heavy storms, there's more storms forecast today. That challenge is real for us. That is reflected in the flood zones, which is the second point. So as part of any scheme development, the flood maps and flood zones are updated with the latest information and intelligence. Flood maps are also updated, and the flood zones, they're calibrated when we have flood events as well. And that includes the extents, the depths and the frequencies as well, but particularly the extents. We also have the surface water risk flood maps as well, which is developed very much in hand with the local authority, who have much greater intelligence around drainage and surface water issues. Final point, yeah, just supportive really, if that's something that we're very keen to do, is looking at renewable energy as part of our scheme development. Also key for us is carbon as well. I think for the Environment Agency, we have a net zero target by 2030, and a real key part of that is construction. That's the main culprit, you could say, of carbon emissions for us. So looking how we can construct differently, but also the assets that we deliver. So I mentioned around pumping, but the kind of materials that we use as well. So yeah, I think we're always looking to be innovative, and that's a key part of that is speaking to people that we don't normally speak to, or people that we haven't spoken to historically is probably the best way to phrase it, is moving away from our standard approach with the same people. It is more about who can we work with differently, and that's something we're very keen to look at through the West Yorkshire Flood Risk Partnership, the RFCC, and initiatives like the Flood Innovation Programme as well.
Thank you, Mark. Andrew.
It's a local plan question again, really, which is how much input do you have into local plans going forward? The sort of things I'm thinking about are, you talk about nature-based solutions, then large-scale tree planting in certain areas, mandating SUDs on homes, because that policy is not really well established, is it? Things like that. Strategic reservoirs placed at certain points. So I just wonder if there's a greater role the Environment Agency could take in terms of advice to councils on local plans that would make us more resilient. Is there more that could be done?
Mark.
Thank you, Councillor. I think there is. I have to confess, this isn't my area of expertise, I'm afraid. It's a different team that deal with that. But there certainly is, and we do have a key role within the local plans and the SFRAs that support those local plans. Yeah, and I think there is a greater role. I probably will need to speak to somebody back to provide more detail, because that's not my particular area of expertise, unfortunately, but keen to pick that up outside of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. I certainly know in Calderdale's example that the later you're doing your local plan, the more there's issues and the more consultation there has been. And of course, advice on master planning over certain numbers and so on. And we have done a lot of, with the help of the Environment Agency, included a lot about SUDs, swales, attenuation tanks, lakes, etc. There really is quite a lot there now, and it's partly in Calderdale because it's one of the most frequently flooded areas in the country. It's got to be at the centre of our local plan because we have steep hillsides and we have valley bottoms that flood, and it's been a real challenge for us in terms of our local plan. And the Environment Agency have been very helpful, particularly in relation, and Yorkshire Water, in relation to some of the early infrastructure planning around any size of development in terms of managing not just flooding but surface water and water management generally, and nature-based solutions in terms of, as you say, some of the preventative work. But later I can see, as local plans come to be reviewed at the end of their 5-year term, actually this is going to be the topic of the day. Mark, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Chair. I guess just one thing to add as well is the challenge around Schedule 3 and local authorities' role in being a SUDS approving body. That's a real risk, particularly around capacity of local authorities and skills as well. It's been flagged as one of the key risks now in the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, the RFCC, which I mentioned earlier. And we're certainly supporting Yorkshire-wide local authorities in working together to actually try and address that risk, and that's looking at a number of mitigation measures around upskilling and sharing resources as well. But that's a real challenge for local authorities on the horizon is introduction of Schedule 3 and that SUDS local approving body.
If members are happy with the passporting the schemes on their way, and that the 5 recommendations in the paperwork that you've got in terms, with the corrections as advised, we do not want Keighley to be left out in any way. Happy for members to, and Leah, I'm so sorry, you did indicate earlier, I beg your pardon, please.
Well, I think I've one very specific question, which is, have Yorkshire Water been involved? And it sounds like you do talk to them, because obviously that's a really key partner. And I think it is just sort of building on what everyone said, that it's efficient in that your projects are efficient in resources used, but also efficient in value delivered, because it's delivering nature, it's delivering health and well-being, it's delivering amenity. You know, it's the ways that we're getting more bang for our buck with the infrastructure that's provided. So it's not just putting in a wall, it's like, what else can that deliver as well? So I think, you know, making sure that we get maximum value out of things. And then just one sort of, on the recommendations, it says conditions have been set. These have been do you need to tell us what those conditions are, or like, what are they? I couldn't see any reference to what they were. It just said you need to approve the conditions. That's okay. Thank you.
Mark. Thank you, Leah.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up the first 2 points, and I'll look to Justin for the final point, if that's okay, Justin. So yeah, Yorkshire Water, one of the risk management authorities, engaged in the RFCC. So work in collaboration with them around developing these projects, particularly projects which have surface water mitigation, such as Keighley and Stockbridge, the alleviation scheme. Yeah, and I guess just to agree and support the comment made around efficiency and delivery and looking at wider benefits. And I'll just go back to my earlier comment around actually working in wider partnerships for people that help us realise those wider benefits. There is an initiative supported by the RFCC called the West Yorkshire Flood Innovation Programme, and that's the West Yorkshire Local Authority, the Environment Agency, Leeds University and Combined Authority, looking at innovative ways that we can deliver projects, but innovative ways in who we collaborate with. And we're very keen to explore and deliver projects that are place-based rather than just reducing flood risk. But obviously it is a very important factor in what we do. And I think, Justin, if I can hand over to you for the last point.
Thanks for that, Mark. I just think, just on the Yorkshire Water point as well, I'd just like to note that obviously this is the kind of the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure element of our programme. But we have got, I think, £7.1 million natural flood management programme as well. And although Yorkshire Water have been engaged in both sides of things, they are a major stakeholder, particularly on the NFM as a landowner. So there's a lot of tree planting work and other kind of natural flood management measures that are taking place in their areas of land. So they're a key partner on that front. In terms of the conditions, yeah, sorry I didn't go through those in detail. They are noted at page 64. So basically it's around tolerances and costs and the outputs. So in terms of the costs, one of the tolerances that it stays within 10% of the costs outlined in the report. And also in terms of timescales, within 6 months, so some of the timescales that are set on pages, give me a second, 64 and 63. And then it also in terms of the outputs, is the 10% tolerance in terms of those as well. And the outputs, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, are the levels of enhanced flood protection that we're providing to homes and businesses. I think they're the main ones. I can follow up if you want any more clarification on that, but they're the key ones. Sorry, it's a bit of a chase of papers and things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Mark. Are the committee content to let those recommendations go through and send this on its way to the next stage? Thank you. Moving on to item 10, and I think that's you again, Noel.
It is indeed, thank you, Chair. So, Better Homes Hub kind of update. I won't go through the full report because there's quite a bit in there. I think just to draw your attention to what we're trying to do with this paper is, first and foremost, it's to give you a little bit of an update on what activity has happened since we last spoke about this at committee. But also, as with the kind of local energy piece as well, is really to seek your views on what success looks like to you and how you'd like to be involved in the programme. But I'll come back to those kind of asks after I've kind of just flagged a couple of things that might be of interest. So the first is related to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and just to kind of give you an update on where we're at with that. So for those that aren't familiar, this is money that we've secured with the social housing providers in the region to help upgrade properties to a higher level of insulation. So I think it's to meet EPCC or better. So Wave 1 is forecasted now to complete 924 properties. So nearly 1,000 there, which is great, and then that'll be added to in terms of Wave 2 with an additional nearly 2,500 homes into properties, and then on top of that we also have the 5 million from Gain Share through our SHDF booster scheme, which will deliver nearly 1,800 homes with improved energy efficiency. So a good slug of kind of homes being upgraded as a result of that funding, which was great to note. The other pieces to kind of note is that we will be running a Tell Tracy public engagement campaign on the climate agenda towards the end of the year. So it's just to kind of put on your radars, and this will very much be about face-to-face engagement with groups. There'll be a digital survey there, and really this is an opportunity for us to really gauge the temperature with the residents of West Yorkshire around the kind of barriers to climate change, but particularly barriers to retrofitting their homes. And then we'll be able to utilise that learning as we design the one-stop shop process. So just to put that on your radar, we'll provide more information on that when we get to it. The other piece to kind of flag to you is around our submission of a £1.6 million bid to the North East Yorkshire Net Zero Hub Local Energy Advice Demonstrator. A bit of a word soup for you there, but basically what we're trying to do there is to test innovative approaches to providing advice, energy advice to hard to reach and digitally excluded groups. So this project will look at, among other things, targeting those whose language is not, the first language is not English, and also the elderly will be looked at as part of this, both from a fuel poor elderly perspective, but also an affluent elderly perspective as well. So both kind of groups. And the idea is that we're looking at how do we get over the threshold with those individuals to give them that advice, and how that leads on to the provision of a much more in-depth advice and them installing measures. So we are expected to learn the outcome of that fairly soon, and that will run till March 2025 if we are successful. We are coming to the end of a procurement exercise to secure the services of a consultant to provide client-side support to the Better Homes Hub. So this is very much helping us to develop the programme, but move quicker as well on some of the aspects of that we know we need to do, given the sheer scale of the activities that will be required to get to where we need to be, which is that end-to-end offer for residents of West Yorkshire to retrofit their homes. So we'll be able to give an update on that at the next meeting, on who was successful in the work that they'll actually be doing. And then just the final point of note is that the strategic outline case for the programme was taken to the combined authority at the June meeting. What that did was approve an indicative allocation of just over 18 million for the programme, and to secure some additional development costs for additional staff, consultancy support, research, and developing our area-based demonstrator programmes and the one-stop shop. That kind of gives you a little bit of a flavour of the activity. There's obviously more in the report itself. So if I can turn to kind of the discussion points, I think the first one really we're asking is, there's a lot about it's kind of delivering smaller scale activity, but we obviously need to scale up, and it would be great to get an understanding from committee around how we do that scaling up process, because we only have 15 years left until 2038 and our net zero target, so we need to really start ramping up on that. So very much welcome committee views on that. And then in terms of success, what does that look like for you in terms of short, medium and long term? What would you expect to see delivered in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, just so we have a good understanding of expectations from committee. And then again, very similar to previous item, how can we best tap into your experience and knowledge? How do you want to be involved as individuals and as a committee in this agenda? I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Open for comments. Andrew.
So one or two thoughts. Let's have a think. Tell Tracy. Well, let's see. I mean, I do wonder through this what it is that we're going to find out that we don't really know anyway. You know, in terms of the what are the reasons why people don't do the work? Well, there's been loads and loads of studies about this. We're not short of studies as to why people don't do the right thing in terms of spending all their money insulating their home rather than going on holiday to wherever it happens to be. We've got loads of information about this. And here's the run up to an election, isn't it? Anyway, we'll leave that to one side. Yeah, tell Tracy. So there's that. I mean, I think the other thought I have on this is basically I'd rather see less properties done, but done well. I don't think the number of properties done with loft insulation is necessarily what we're trying to do here. I think what we're trying to do is use this to build skills and capability and capacity to be able to do more things. And so I would like to see more activity on better houses as opposed to more spreading the money thinly. I think that's what I'd like to see as success. Keep saying about EPCs, keep saying that energy EPCs are not a really good measure of energy performance. Not just me saying it, but the people who sort of academia on this. So I think we ought to have our own standards as to what it is we're actually trying to achieve, whether that's air changes per hour, where it happens to be, but make it about the performance of the property. I think that's an important thing. The energy advice that's been offered. So a lot of this stuff is not just about fuel poverty or it's about general poverty. And if there's somebody going into a home, then they ought to be able to provide a wide range of advice and access to services and benefits advice, debt advice, or at least be able to signpost people to that. So I'd like to see that person going to that home is as useful as they possibly can be. In terms of getting involved, I'd really be interested in what it is they do when they go in and understand what it is they do. I used to manage a visiting local energy advice service, so yeah, I'd be interested in comparing that and seeing what they do. So there's a few thoughts.
Thank you, Andrew. A lot covered there. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I mean, I agree with much of what you've said there, especially EPCs and stuff. That's an ongoing battle I imagine we're going to be fighting over the years. But I think success looks like, and it's easy to centralise these things, and I appreciate, and this is no disrespect, that a lot of these projects are probably going to end up happening in Leeds by nature of the fact that we're in Leeds. So success to me looks like stuff happening everywhere, you know. I mean, just going back to agenda item 7, data shows level of fuel poverty, households with lower energy efficiency and flood risk in Calderdale, and how they compare. Sort of, I'm not just pitching for Calderdale here, so please, maybe a tiny bit. But I think it's important because you know we've all got very different sort of geographies, and we've all got lots of different sort of processes going on, and houses built around hearths and that sort of stuff. So it would be demonstrated projects that make the most of their various places. And I think the other thing really is making sure that, like, our registered providers and other people tell people about the work that's going on, so it not just being a centralised spot where all this information is being disseminated out, that we make people take a little bit of an ownership of the agenda. I mean, environmental groups like XR, one of their first things is tell us about it, so let's do a little bit of that and make sure that our partners are really speaking in one singular voice.
Scott, I'm going to take Martin and then Leah.
First of all, quick question to Noel. Could you explain a little bit more about where the area-based demonstrators are up to? What sort of ideas and patterns are emerging from that? Because I think that'll go to what Scott said about variety and spread of initiatives. In terms of scaling up, demonstrators are really important because people need to have confidence in that things work. There's been far too many false starts for a variety of reasons. Far too many things have gone wrong with retrofit in the past. Even 2 weeks ago, Leeds Sustainability Institute did its feedback on its DEEP project and said there were significant variations between internal wall insulation and external wall insulation in terms of its effectiveness. So, you know, we're learning all the time about this stuff, and it's not surprising that the population at large is worried and sceptical and even cynical about it, and therefore not likely to invest their own hard-earned cash and rather go off on holiday instead. In terms of scaling up, we need a long-term plan, we need long-term finance, we need to invest in boots on the ground, early doors, because you cannot do this without having people on the ground effectively selling the stuff to tenants and residents and homeowners and stuff. And that applies in housing organisations and local authorities and whatever. I don't have the resources I need in my organisation to do what I need to do yet. It's an ongoing battle because we're pulled in all sorts of different directions, and that's you know, we're a microcosm of probably the public sector as a whole. So the challenge is huge, and we're not even scratching the surface yet.
Thank you. Gideon next, and then Katie. Leah, I absolutely beg your pardon. I didn't. Last time I wrote down your name and then didn't call you, and this time I haven't even written down your name. I do apologise. Let's have Leah.
I just wanted to sort of come back on what Andrew said about the level at which you do houses, and is it, we need to work out what the right level is. Is it that we do few houses amazingly brilliant, but what delivers the most long term, what level of doing up or of improvement delivers the against our climate targets long term? So is it fewer houses at 90% of, you know, or is it more houses at 70%, or is it loads of houses at 60%? What actually delivers most for people and for against our targets? So we've got to find that level as well, haven't we? I think. So I don't know.
Go on, Andrew.
I think it's really about, because the amount of money that we've got is actually quite small compared with the job as a whole. So the question is not necessarily what we do here. I don't think it's going to be about achieving the targets in themselves. It's about the skills. It's about starting stuff up. It's about providing that capacity and capability to be able to move things on. So I wouldn't say, well, you know, that delivers that much carbon saving, that delivers that. I think that's maybe not the way we'll approach it.
What we need to find out early on now, though. I think what you're saying is absolutely bang on. We need to develop the skills, and it's sort of what's the objectives for this part of the project, isn't it? In this early stages.
I think it's that, but that's just me. That's just
and
me.
is it also finding out about, you know, a bit of monitoring to find out how much that's going to deliver against that target?
Thank you. And thank you, Leah. I will try and do better in future. Gideon next.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment, first of all, about EPCs. Yes, they're rubbish. However, they are actually being worked on at the moment at a government level. There's a lot of work going on, and one of the people who's leading on that happens to have come from the Passive House Trust. So, you know, fingers crossed, there's actually some people who understand what's going on, and maybe EPCs can improve dramatically. But let's stop not talking about EPCCs, please, because that seems a bit of a pointless exercise, and we'll have to go back and redo it all again. Okay, so yes, we need to understand what we're getting bang for buck. which I totally agree with Leah. And it also needs to, I think, have some KPIs with this. How many people are we teaching or are gaining skills that can then go out to others? And I think that's sort of what Andrew's hinting at about as well. I think there's a real big opportunity for hubs, panel and mentoring schemes, and they don't have to be financed ones. We have a lot of people out there. I was in a meeting recently for community buildings who, would be up for learning how to do the basics of the initial assessment. And if we get if we get 10 doing that and those 10 do 10, suddenly we have a very big opportunity to do initial screening of all of this. So I think I'd like to see that being considered and how we would do it. I'd like to see an advisory panel for all of this, and an oversight panel for these, because there's so much within it. It would be useful for us to be able to keep on a track of what's going on and actually just probe and question. The other thing I've got is, and it's across the whole piece really, is can we have a sustainable procurement strategy for all of these things? There are standards out there for sustainable procurement. There's an ISO one out there at the moment, but we need to start putting in place things that say whoever's delivering, is going to do it sustainably. If they're going to drive around to all these houses in a diesel car, an old diesel car, how does that work in relation to what we're trying to achieve? So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Katie, next.
So at this point, I think I will struggle to say anything original because everything that I've got down on my list has kind of been covered, really. It is absolutely vital that we get demonstrators right. And I was also at the DEEP report, and there were some horrific stories of where retrofit had gone wrong. And if it goes wrong, it's completely and utterly pointless in terms of carbon saving and all the other benefits that go with it. So I think one of your points is in terms of scaling up. I think before we scale up, we absolutely have to get demonstrator projects right. And then everything else that people have said about long-term plans, skills, trusted information, that's another really, really important one. I think that's a huge barrier for people having any work done. If they, if it's going to be kind of for the able to pay market, where are they going to get that trusted information from? I think is absolutely key as well.
Thank you very much. I think there are some analogies, just to link back to the previous item, with the discussions we've had at various flooding committees in terms of property level resilience, property level protection. Enormous amount of money was wasted post 2015 grants for doing things to your property, the flood doors and one-way flaps and pumps and so on. And we've learned a lot from that experience, actually, but money was wasted in terms of the property level protection. So I absolutely would agree that in terms of information, trusted information, and the one-stop shops and getting that right. I think the other thing that we've got responsibility for is this, what we're talking about here in this committee, as well as the wider issues, is what do you spend public money on? What's appropriate for a public sector intervention? Because these are taxpayers, council taxpayers, money that we're spending, and we know how hard it is with the cost of living crisis in terms of some people finding the money to pay their monthly standing order for their council tax. And here we are saying, well, okay, this is money that has to be used and shared in a collaborative way and used for these schemes. So I think we need to be very careful about not wasting public money in relation to this. And I think that's why some of what's been reported already in terms of making decisions about where some of that public sector intervention money is spent in terms of those most in need and least likely to be able to have their own money to spend on it. I think in terms of retrofit, we all know that this is literally a drop in the ocean in terms of the sheer level and scale of challenge that's facing us. And I think the point that somebody made, I can't quite remember earlier, about homeowners and what the levers are in terms of getting them to take an interest. I think it was Andrew, not taking their foreign holiday, but actually spending some serious money, of their own money, rather than the public sector money that we're charged with here. I think there's also a useful point that came up about, as well as things like sustainable procurement and so on. There's a useful point which is a link to the next item on the agenda, which is about skills and about green skills, absolutely crucial. Gideon, you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, just wanted to highlight a government programme called Every Home Counts, which was it was done about 8 years ago, I think it was started, and it was looking at, it wasn't every home count, each home counts, and it was looking at what interventions we could do and what measures could be developed. And it went through, I was involved with it quite heavily, and it went through a very torrid time, and they were trying to do things. It never got off the ground, but there's some interesting reading within the report of what actually was happening. So things like the insulation programme up in Preston that went horribly wrong and created, a real down on insulation and things like that. So I think there's some lessons to be learnt from that, but not on what they did afterwards.
Thank you very much. Noel, I don't know if there's anything further you want to say on that item. I think in terms of you've got plenty of material there, and members are asked to note the contents of this report. Anything further to say, Noel?
I was just going to come back on Martin's ask around the area-based demonstrators. So conversations are ongoing with each of the local authorities to really put some flesh on the bones in terms of what those look like. The team are looking to bring at least 2 of those forward for consideration in the autumn. So there'll be at least 2 of them. To give you an idea of what they look like, one is related to an integrated package of measures for cost-effective systems that can be funded by grants such as ECO. So I'm reading off, so apologies if it feels a bit stunted, this. Targeting kind of inner city Victorian town terraces, looking at the right to buy side of things. It'll look at internal wall insulation, it'll look at innovative technology such as Wonderall radiant panels, that type of thing. Another one, give you an idea of the work, is about hybrid solid wall kind of project. One is which looks at internal wall insulation to the front, external wall insulation to the rear elevations. It could look at room in roof and loft insulation, underfloor insulation, those types of things. That gives you a flavour of the type of thing that's coming forward. And this has been done collaboratively with the local authorities.
Martin's gearing up to come back on that.
My initial reaction to that is disappointing there's only 2, and it's a bit worrying that they seem, from what you said, that they seem to be taking a technical approach as opposed to a people-focused approach. The barrier here is not the technical, it's the people, and the technical has to be fitted around the people. So, yeah, area-based to me means community. It doesn't mean imposing a technical approach on a group of properties. So I appreciate we've only got a snapshot and put Noel on the spot, but
yeah, certainly in terms of work that we've done with a local housing association, where we had a new build and improved the houses of the private sector owners, some rented, some owned, just alongside, so that we didn't have a 2-tier housing development. And just the personal experiences of the people in those private housing who had just transformed their lives, really. It's actually very moving in terms of the amount of money they've saved, the level of comfort they feel in their homes. It's, you know, it's life transforming really for some of those people really. And you're right, that human aspect and community aspect is something we mustn't lose sight of. Okay, are members happy to, we've had a good discussion around that. Are members happy to note the contents of the report, and I think officers feel they've had some things to take away. If we may then move on to item 11, and it's on to skills, and green skills. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So the paper provided an update on green skills and plans for future skills programmes, the investment in digital skills, green skills and support for employers were prioritised by leaders in February, and you'll see from the interventions outlined in the paper that they have been developed to support employers, individuals, education providers to attract and retain talent, to address the upskilling and retraining needs that move us towards more sustainable and carbon neutral region. So we've outlined in the report some of the demand and scale for green jobs and green skills and how this is projected and the projected needs. We've developed recommendations through the Green Jobs Task Force that look to address the scale of that need, particularly how we'll support young people to feel more inspired about green skills, but also how we'll support businesses and adults, as well as positioning West Yorkshire for future funding. So outlined in the paper, we've just done some extensive consultation with our committees, Green Jobs Task Force members and local authorities, and the Combined Authority Board approved £7.5 million funding from Gainshare and also decommitted funds through our existing employment and skills budget to develop programmes, complementary skills packages that will be developed between between September 23 and March 26. The skills packages that we've outlined are built on the success of our previous programmes and address some of the market failure. The idea is that the skills packages will add value and align to regional wide activity and also address skills gaps and funding gaps where future funding cannot address. So the programmes outlined are interdependent and interlinking and have been designed in collaboration with partners. They are cross-cutting and have the ability to support progress and align to other programmes such as the Better Homes Hub, Electric Vehicle Strategy and the Business Sustainability West Yorkshire programme. The packages are made up of two programmes. The first one is Workforce Development and Growth. This includes 2 projects, an impartial regional offer to employers, including specialist support to enable businesses to access green skills support. This aligns really well to the mayoral pledge to create 1,000 green jobs, but also supports businesses to access skills funding to help them reduce carbon. And the second project is the Mayor's SME Graduate Programme. This is a place-based approach. This is designed to increase the uptake of graduates in SMEs, where there are specific skills demands around green skills. The second package is called Workforce for the Future. That includes 3 projects. One is focused around digital inclusion. Another one is focused around regional careers, engagement and inspiration. This is really aimed at how we engage young people and adults and help them understand what green skills opportunities are available to them. This will involve a procurement of a provider to engage with primary children in climate activities to raise awareness and to help them feel inspired about where future jobs and careers will be. And then the third project is an FE Development Fund. This will be part of phase 2 of the project and will be delivered from January 24. This is a really innovative opportunity to help FE providers to build capacity to respond to where skills needs will be in the future. We've been working really closely with colleagues in West Yorkshire Housing Partnerships to get some steer on where we might be able to test pilots to work with the FE sector to respond to needs. We've also visited Greater Manchester Green Skills Academy to consider how we might present options to do a similar West Yorkshire based model. So there's a really ambitious opportunity throughout these programmes. There are multiple objectives that we've outlined in the paper that will focus on a responsive and solution-focused approach to really addressing the needs of the labour market for both individuals and businesses. There are some opportunities that require development. One is the FE development programme and how we might work with businesses, skills funding and how we might develop opportunities for employers to tap into that. And we'd really be interested in this committee to help provide that steer and to support us to develop those. So I think that was all I wanted to say in terms of the summary, and then just to open up, a discussion around how this committee would like to be involved in that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Can I just, I think you were here for the earlier discussion that we had in terms of relationship with other combined authority committees, and in this case, the Employment and Skills Committee. Have they seen this paper? They already bought into it and are content with it?
Yes, they are, and we also have our Employment and Skills Committee meeting this week as well that we're going to update on this again, but they've fully endorsed this approach.
Thank you. The committee here no doubt have had very similar papers in the past. I confess I did struggle with this, really. I did struggle to make it real. And I could really have done with some case studies from the perspective of the young person, its perspective of the FE provider, the perspective of the small and medium-sized enterprise, and I struggled to make it real. If you were asked me to do an elevator pitch and they all sound very lovely, the different packages, I really did find it to make it practical in a way that I could, as a member of this committee and as chair, what do I say in terms of how this will make those different people's lives better and what we're doing. And it's a lot of money. If I was to write a press release about this and the importance of it, I would really struggle to really make it tell. But maybe the rest of the committee's got this and it's just me. So I'm going to go to Gideon first. Tell me what I need to know, Gideon.
No, actually, Chair, I'm going to say thank you for saying that because it's sort of a prelude to what I was going to say. Thank you, Michelle, for that. I heard a lot of words. I'm, from a private sector point of view, I'm not sure what it really means to us. Overall, nationally, we need to do 600,000 heat pumps a year. In West Yorkshire, that equates to, if I remember rightly, 130,000 a year. We know that the whole country is only doing 69,000. How does that relate to actually upskilling all those people, and what target are we getting for the number of people who can deliver a heat pump in the proper way? How can they assess what it is? The same with PV, the same with all the other technologies we've got and everything else that goes with that. You heard us talking about the advice centres. If we go for all of that advice, then we're going to need a lot of people to be able to do that. But I'm not hearing clear understanding of what that's going to deliver, and that would be really helpful for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take Martin first, and Michelle. We're not shooting the messenger. We're just struggling to manage some of this agenda in our own heads. So Martin first.
I'm going to make an ask and an offer. So with the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, very broadly speaking, I estimate we need to invest over £3 billion in our stock. I said £180,000. If we have to spend £20,000 property on 2/3 of those, that adds up to £3 billion plus. We're already starting to think about, with potentially the support of the Combined Authorities Better Homes programme, how we collaborate and bring together our collective investment pipelines over the next 10 to 15 years to give us an offer out to the manufacturing industry, the installation industry, so that we hopefully that can respond to meet our needs in a strategic way. And equally, we shuffle our programmes around so that we're not all trying to fit thousands of heat pumps in the same 2-year window, that actually we're spreading that programme out. At the same time, we're about to start a conversation with the TUC on them helping us to align our own workforce development programmes, because as well as looking to the industry to support us, we actually need to get our own house in order and upskill our own people. So the ask and the offer is, can we, in the same way that we're collaborating with Noel and his team on the kind of investment side of things, can we collaborate with you guys on the workforce development and the skills side of things?
Excellent. I've got Neil next and then Katie.
Are we clear on what a green job is? What a green job is and the green jobs that we need, because a few people have talked here about fitting heat pumps and solar and stuff like that. But the breadth of a green job is many more. It's transport engineers, it's designers, it's here. So I think understanding that parameter is quite important.
I thought you were going to tell me what a green job was actually, but Katie.
Yeah, just coming in on that, I think, didn't the Ahead Partnership do some work with schools about that, looking at saying what a green job is specifically? And I can't remember what the outcome of it was, but I think that just about anything could be a green job, I think, was the outcome of that piece of work. And I think that's probably a message that we have to get across to young people, that it's about their careers in the future, in a future where we have a changing climate, and surely that covers everything, really. Anyway, my question was a specific one relating to the FE Development Fund. Can you go into a bit more detail about that? Would that involve creating apprenticeships or new qualifications or anything like that?
Thank you. I'm going to, before you come back, Michelle, I'm going to take a couple of other questions, comments, and then let you respond. Scott.
Thank you. It was only a brief one, really. I think it's on the green jobs thing, and it may be inclined to get a bit messy with that and get bogged down with what is a green job. And clearly, we could have a round table that lasted all day long, and we'd have various different things. But I think there's two things, isn't there? I think there's about transformation of organisations and how people within the workforce work differently to make sure sustainable practice are achieved, and whether that's a care worker, travelling within her own neighbourhood rather than across huge boroughs and thinking about travel and transport, and or actually where we've got specific skills gaps and we can rag rate where they are in terms of renewables, in terms of transport and all that sort of stuff. Feel like two very separate bits, so we probably need to be cognizant of that, or we're never going to get anywhere.
I'm just keeping an eye on Leah, just in case she indicates and I miss it. Michelle, some response from you, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in terms of bringing it to life, absolutely we can do that. We've had quite a lot of consultation with businesses, but partners, but that it's not ended. So I think we want to continue with that consultation piece. But I think if case studies would help, or scenarios, or ideas, options, that kind of thing, definitely something we can present to this committee. Absolutely, to make that more tangible, more real. I think in terms of making it more practical and real, we are in the stages of developing this, and we're really keen to get thoughts on how we should do that. And the project team is in place from September, so I think there is work to do on getting that right, really, that offer right, and taking on board your feedback, Gideon, on the kind of what does it actually mean to businesses. It's a very crowded landscape, and we know that there are multiple offers out there, just what we manage as a CA, but how do we actually feed those in and make them meaningful for businesses? And that's really what we're aiming to do through this. And it won't solve all the problems, but we want to kind of provide that clarity of that landscape through this. And if there are any ways, you know, that you think that would work best, would be absolutely open to a conversation about that.
Thank you, Michelle, and certainly new team in September, various points that you've made. We need to come back. We need to come back to this issue, and we also need to talk to the Employment and Skills Combined Authority Committee. Gideon.
I'd just say happy to help. Just I'll give you some details later.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. And can I offer one of my absolute sort of pet things I keep saying in different forums, hoping that somebody will take it up, is something that in Calderdale we have actually the highest number of startup businesses in West Yorkshire. I don't quite know why, small micro businesses, but majority SMEs within the borough. And it'd be really helpful. You know, people have said to me, could you just say to small businesses, what 3 things could you do that are really going to make a difference? And do that through the chamber, through the federation, you know. Actually, people do want to engage with this agenda, but they want very practical things. What 3 things could we do to make a start? Actually, and these are businesses without HR departments and policy departments and so on, but actually very practical things that the small and micro businesses could do. Those kind of things I think would help tremendously. So I've offered that again. Gideon.
Can I just pick up one thing? On the digital side of it, there was a comment made to me the other day that the level of entry to get access to some of the skills side of it is too high, and a lot of those organisations can't get digital support because, and I don't know the terminology properly, but it was at a 4 and they're only at a 2 or something. And so we need, if we can look at that in terms of where we're pitching up, any support would be very helpful. Thank you. And just to say that I totally agree with you, it was only examples.
Michelle, last word from you.
On the digital side, I'm not sure if you've spoken to my colleague Marianne Hewitt, who leads on digital for the Combined Authority, but there is a piece of work on digital inclusion that is around exactly that, what you've said. So I'm happy to provide details if that's helpful, and she'll be able to talk to you about how that programme works for businesses.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We were asked to share views and comment on that report. I think we've met the brief, actually. Thank you. And moving on to our last substantive item, and that's the Climate Pledge update. And there is a lot in there, and I'm assuming that the paper can be pretty much taken as read. There's quite a long list in terms of updates of things that have happened. Liz, over to you.
Thank you. I think we, given how much there is in this paper, I could spend the next half an hour reading through it, so I probably won't, and we're more than happy just to take questions on the specific elements of it, if that's all right, Chair.
Anybody? Can I ask one then? The zebra, or as we say in Scots, zebra, the zebra bus things, is there a commitment to making sure that this gets rolled out to the other districts? I know there was an application, particularly for Kirklees and Calderdale, I think, and possibly Wakefield, in terms of the next tranche of low emission buses, etc. Is that still on track?
It's a good question, Chair. We don't have anybody from the transport team with us now, but my understanding is that that is very much the case, because the zebra money from government, we then put our own combined authority money to that to enable the 4 million for Calderdale and Kirklees to be rolled out. And my understanding is that's still happening. But I can, if that is not correct, I will correct myself by email.
Gideon.
Yeah, Okay, so there's a few things I've picked up on. In terms of business and sustainability, I am sick to death of walking down the high street and seeing doors left open or gaps in around doors where heat is leaking out. You know, there's things there that we could do, quite low hanging fruit, which we could talk to the businesses about, I think, or offer support for, and that's small and large. So that was one. The electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. Can we see that, please? And can I maybe ask if we can have an input into it? It's talking about guidance in here on 216 about guidance for charge points. There is a lot of stuff going on at the moment. There have been new standards developed, 1899 for instance, a BS standard on charge points. There's a new building regulation which isn't great but is there. But also there's the likes of ChargeSafe, a new organisation that have just started up that are actually going around and looking at all of the different charge points with an assessment system which will actually help with that. And I think those kinds of things we could do fairly easily, fairly quickly. Go back to the point of the commercial sector as well being really important in this. And I think that's something that we need to think about, especially from electric vehicle side of it as well. So that's that one. In terms of the zero emission buses, and Dr. Andy Palmer is very, very influential in this area. He's part of a bus company not so millions of miles away from here, making small electric buses. Have we engaged with them on it and him? Like, he's got a wealth of experience on this kind of thing. You know, so I'm really concerned that we're going to reinvent wheels in saying we need to do another pilot to look at these vehicles for West Yorkshire because we're hilly. Well, there's a lot of other hilly places that have done this, including Scotland. So I would hope that we could learn from them rather than trying to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Liz?
Thank you. If we haven't, we will. With Dr. Palmer, we'll pass that on to the team. And the intention is that we will be able to share the EV strategy. We haven't, Noel and I were just messaging our colleague to see if we could get a date for you, but she hasn't quite come back. I see she's typing. If I get a date before the end of the meeting, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, this is a really good update, and it's good to see it sort of compiled in one place, actually. And I think it'd be good if all of our local authorities could probably follow suit and have a suite of what's going on. I'm sure it'd be interesting for all elected members if it's not happening already, and I'm sure it is. I would just like to pitch to see a really good comms strategy around this, which is a bit proactive in showcasing to help people see the work that's going on and the impact of it as well into the work on net zero. Making sure that's done right is really impactful and really easy to sort of disseminate, you know, with perhaps a 3-tiered thing, infographic to start with, a bit more detail, and then for the nerds, quite the sort of depthy stuff would, I think, be a really good way forward. Maybe all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It was actually going to be one of my questions, really. Item 12 is a bit of a roundup of things that have happened that are related to this committee. And what I don't know is how the communications work within the combined authority. And clearly we have a mayor, and the mayor is the spokesperson. But what comes from this committee that goes to the mayor that then goes out? And basically, this particular committee looked at these things, moved these things onwards, raised these questions, and look at item 12. These are the things that are, you know, either in train or having been completed. And I wondered where that goes in relation to communications and the mayor.
Thank you. It's a good question. So internally, when we're planning for these meetings, we have our comms colleagues in the room, and we try if there are things of note when the papers are published, to actually do something, particularly where there's things that we want to draw attention to the conversation that you're going to have. We do a press notice at that point. So then if colleagues from the press would like to join us, they can, and they know some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And then comms colleagues, again, after the session today, will often do something which presents back the conversation. So, Chair, now you're in your role as Chair, I'm expecting our kind of comms colleagues to liaise with you on that messaging. And I also liaise directly with the Mayor on the agenda, so the Mayor knows what's happening on the Climate Committee's agenda too. And I think, Chair, there's hopefully going to be something after this committee that you're going to do with the Mayor around some of the agenda items. So there's certainly things that we try and make the most of. But again, as always, we can do more.
Thank you. Let's keep those things going. John.
I just wanted to note about the air quality piece. There was a point on 2.42 where it was about the new strategy was anticipated in autumn winter 2023. Will that come back to this committee to be reviewed and updated?
Thank you. Yes, and that's also very good timing because my colleague has got back to me on terms of the EV strategy. It's a similar time frame. So I am wondering, and kind of subject to what you think, Chair, there might be something where we have a bit of a workshop around some of these items, but we'll come back to you on the timeframes of, or on whether it's at the committee or whether there's something around that alongside the EV strategy, which is similar time frame.
Okay. People happy to note that report, and that brings us to the end of the agenda for the meeting, and the next meeting will be on Tuesday the 24th of October. Liz, anything to say just before we finish?
Sorry, if I may, Chair, right back at the start of the meeting, in the minutes there was an action around writing round about Huddersfield bus station. Again, it's handy having the laptop. The colleague has said that we did do that on the 23rd of March, but just to confirm that we are looking at Huddersfield solar panels on the Huddersfield bus station. So just to
on the facade or on the
if you look at your emails, Councillor Cooper, from the 23rd of March, Owen set out what that looked like.
That's good.
So
23rd of March.
but yeah, so looking at emails, if you haven't got it, let me know. But sorry, Chair, I thought it was helpful for the minutes.
Thank you. That's what I call very responsive officer work. So next meeting, October. Can I say thank you to everybody on the committee? Thank you for such a good discussion and contributions, and thank you to the officers for keeping us in the straight and narrow, especially me. And just thank you for your company. And I look forward to October.
Thank you.